The story of Dan begins in the book of Genesis, during a time when Jacob, the father of the 12 tribes of Israel, had a large and complicated family. Jacob was the grandson of Abraham and one of the most important figures in the Hebrew Bible. He had 12 sons, but they didn't all come from the same mother. He had children with 4 different women, 2 wives, Leah and Rachel, and their 2 servants, Zilpah and Bilhah. Rachel was the wife Jacob loved the most, but she could not have a child for many years. This made her very sad and frustrated, especially because her sister Leah, who was also married to Jacob, had already given birth to many sons. In ancient times, having children, especially sons, was seen as a blessing and a sign of honor. Rachel's inability to have children was a heavy emotional burden for her. Wanting to become a mother in any way she could, Rachel followed a tradition that was common in that region and time. She gave her servant Bilhah to Jacob so that Bilhah could have a child. The child would be considered Rachel's, even if she didn't give birth herself. When Bilhah gave birth to a son, Rachel named him Dan. She said, "God has judged me and heard my voice." The name Dan comes from the Hebrew word for judge. It was her way of saying that God had seen her suffering and given her justice by allowing her to have a son through Bilhah. Dan was Jacob's 5th son, and even though he was born to a servant, he was treated as a full member of the family. Dan would later become the founder of one of the 12 tribes of Israel. Each of Jacob's sons became the patriarch of a tribe, and these tribes would form the foundation of the Israelite people. When Jacob was old and near death, he called all of his sons to give them special blessings. These blessings were not just kind words from a father. In the Hebrew tradition, they were considered prophetic messages that pointed to the destiny and future character of each tribe. They revealed strengths, weaknesses, and symbolic traits that would define the group of people descending from each son. But what Jacob said about Dan was very different from what he said to the others. In Genesis 49:16-17, Jacob said, "Dan will provide justice for his people as one of the tribes of Israel. Dan will be a snake by the roadside, a viper along the path that bites the horse's heels so that its rider tumbles backward." The first part sounds good. Dan will judge his people, which means he will have authority and be a leader. But the second part is strange and harder to understand. Jacob compares Dan to a snake, hiding by the road and striking when no one expects it. In the Bible, snakes can mean many things. Sometimes they are clever, and sometimes they are dangerous. They can represent wisdom, hidden power, or deceit, depending on the context. But they are always hard to see, and they act in secret. This made people wonder, why did Jacob use such an image for his own son? Was it a compliment, or was it a warning? This unusual blessing was the first sign that the tribe of Dan might have a mysterious future, and one that would not be easy to understand. When the Israelites entered the Promised Land, each of the 12 tribes received a piece of land. The tribe of Dan was given territory along the western coast of Canaan. This area had good land and access to the sea, which made it important for farming and trade. Its location also gave it great potential for contact with other cultures through ports and coastal routes. But there was a big problem. The land was already controlled by the Philistines. The Philistines were strong, well-organized, and known for using advanced weapons made of iron. Unlike many other local groups, they had mastered iron tools and war strategies. They built fortified cities, trained warriors, and dominated the coastal areas. They often fought against the Israelites and made life very difficult for the Danites. Battles were common, and the Philistines did not easily give up their territory. Over time, the tribe of Dan was pushed out of the coastal region and forced into the nearby hills. They were unable to fully take control of their land. This made the tribe feel weak and unsafe, especially compared to other tribes who were more successful in settling their regions. Because they could not settle in their assigned land, the Danites decided to look elsewhere. They sent out scouts to find a new place to live. This was a risky move, but it showed their determination to survive. In the book of Judges, chapter 18, it says that they sent 5 spies to search the north of the land. These men discovered a peaceful and isolated city called Laish. The people there lived quietly, with no strong army or nearby allies to defend them. The Danites saw this as their chance. They gathered 600 warriors, traveled north, and attacked the city. It was a surprise attack, and the city fell quickly. They took it by force, destroyed it completely, and then rebuilt it in their own name. They called it Dan. This new city was far away from the other tribes, near the base of Mount Hermon in the far north of Israel. It became their new home, but it also separated them from the rest of the Israelite tribes. In their new home, the tribe of Dan created its own place of worship. Instead of going to the holy places approved by God, they made a carved image and set it up like an idol. They chose their own priests, who were not from the tribe of Levi. According to the Bible, only Levites were allowed to be priests in Israel, and this act was against God's commandments. This decision to build their own worship center marked the start of Dan's spiritual fall. While other tribes followed the laws given through Moses, Dan followed their own path. Over time, this led to them being seen as outsiders in the religious life of Israel. And then, something even more surprising happened. In the book of Revelation, the final book of the New Testament, the Apostle John writes a vision of the end times. In one part of the vision, 12,000 people from each of the 12 tribes of Israel are sealed by God. This seal is a mark of protection and favor, given before a time of great judgment. The list represents the faithful remnant of Israel that will be saved. But Dan is missing. Instead of Dan, the list includes the tribe of Manasseh, the son of Joseph. This has confused scholars, historians, and religious thinkers for many centuries. Dan was one of the original 12 tribes. Why would it suddenly disappear from such an important prophecy? One theory comes from early Christian thinkers who believed that Dan's absence was not a mistake, but a warning. Among them was Irenaeus, a bishop from the 2nd century. He was one of the most influential early theologians and wrote a famous work called Against Heresies. In it, he tried to explain how certain people or groups could play a role in future evil. He wrote that the Antichrist, the great deceiver who would rise in the end times, could come from the tribe of Dan. Irenaeus looked at Jacob's ancient prophecy in Genesis, where Dan is called a serpent by the road who bites the horse's heels. In the Bible, the serpent is one of the most loaded symbols. From the serpent in the Garden of Eden to the fiery serpents in the desert, it is often linked to deception, danger, spiritual rebellion, or divine judgment. For many believers, it was no coincidence that Dan was given this image. Over time, this idea grew. Other early Christian writers, like Hippolytus of Rome, also supported the theory. Hippolytus was one of the first to write systematically about the end times. He believed that Dan's early choice to set up idols and break God's commandments was a sign of something darker. To him and others, Dan represented a tribe that had willingly separated itself from God's authority and opened the door to corruption. Because of this, some believed that God left Dan out of the final vision, not only as a punishment, but as a clue. A tribe that had started with a promise to bring justice ended up as a symbol of betrayal and spiritual danger. In the eyes of early theologians, this made Dan more than just a lost tribe.